Okay.
Hi, Alex.
Hey, Fran, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Doing okay. Waiting for the warm weather to hit 20 degrees, but
Yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? Hello to everyone.
Hi, Fran. Good to
Hey,
see you.
hey, Patrick, nice to see you again, and thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite.
I don't know about you guys, but it feels like it's kind of balmy out there. I mean, I didn't feel like
Hey,
I
it
was gonna
does.
die if my coat wasn't zipped up. So I don't know, maybe I've got
After
a
the
warped
last few
sense of
days,
things.
well,
I got
Only
really,
Zip it
32.
up, Kate. We don't want to find out you were wrong.
no, I got really scared because the governor just extended the cold air, emergency. And
Oh,
I
come
thought,
on.
yep, yep. And I thought, God, is there something I don't know?
No, please.
I know. I know. Listen, I'm going to Nashville tomorrow for a conference. And, I went on to see what the temperature was so I could figure out what to bring. And
Right.
it's 37 to 51.
Whoa.
Oh, I'm
Bring your
gonna be in
shorts.
DC. I leave for Fran, when are you leaving? We can meet at the airport for coffee.
I am leaving tomorrow morning.
Me too.
Yep. And my plane actually stops in Washington.
Where you go an American?
No, United.
Oh,
That
I
would have
was
been
like,
really
we could be
funny, you
seat
guys.
buddies.
Yeah, that would have been really funny. Really funny. Yeah. I'm I I hope it'll be good. I'm a homebody. I prefer not to travel, but such is life. You have to do those things, right?
What are you going for? Is it the super?
AASA.
Yeah.
I used to have 8 or 10 superintendents that went, and I used to I do a dinner for them,
Yeah.
one of the nights, and now I have 52.
Woo!
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you're not having dinner for them.
it's our national convention.
That's great.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have business partners, so that takes care of it, which is kind of nice. But anyway,
Yeah.
well, it's great to see all of you. Hey, Jessica, thank you for joining us. It's nice to see you.
Good to be here.
And I've been um Jen and I have been looking at this, and it's such a huge charge, and yet, you're looking at education funding, period. Then you're looking at magnets, charters, and alliance, and then you're looking at class size. Those are our charges under this subcommittee. So what I'm hoping today is we've got the experts on here from the Connecticut Finance Project, and our hearts go out to Lisa Hammersley, who lost her husband, Bob, yesterday. He's been ill for a while, and she's just taken such wonderful care of him. But she has a young son, so this isn't easy. But thankfully, Patrick has stepped in for her, And I consider them, the Connecticut Finance Project, the experts in funding. We're working with them on another project, and it's just been amazing. So I'm happy Patrick is here today to talk about their brief on funding and outcomes, and maybe can give us some direction on ECS. I'm also happy to have Alex Knopp here, who is here to talk about the magnet school funding and the Chef versus O'Neill. And all I can say is to that piece, I had to do a presentation some years ago on magnet schools, and when I dug deep, the Band-Aids were just unbelievable. And one thing after another. And so it was very hard to make sense of how the funding operates. But we've been charged with it, so we have to make statements, charters and alliance districts. And so what I'm hoping we can do, guys, maybe I'm too aggressive, and Jen, jump in and tell me I am. I'm hoping that today we can discuss where you think this ought to go, and maybe before the next meeting, we can put together a draft response and then send it out to you prior to the meeting and go through it. I just feel, everyone's working on education funding right now. You've got the legislature with bills coming forward. We've got the governor forming a commission on education funding. So I think, certainly I want our voices heard in the Bergen Commission, but I also think it is very complex, and there'll be voices from all over. So I don't know what you think about that. Jen, go ahead, and others jump in, please. By the way, the meeting started. Yeah.
Be very formal call to order.
Yes, formal call to order.
Thank you for all that, Fran. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you also, George and Ashley from the School and Save Finance Project. We are all very grateful to have you guys crunching somewhat endless numbers for us. I think like the really great news is that I think from the House perspective, an ed financing bill will be 5002, which means that it'll be a House priority. And the Senate, we voted to draft yesterday in committee SB 7, which will be their version of the ed finance bill. The House Republicans are also really focused on this issue. So I'm pretty excited to see where we can get, and perhaps even a veto-proof majority should ours be more generous than what the governor has in mind. So all to say, like, there seems to be real possibility to do something transformative, which I don't want to speak for everyone on this group, but my hunch is that we all recognize is desperately needed, something really transformative for our schools. So with that, like, let's just jump in. I think Fran laid it out really nicely. I think we're going to quickly reach, I'll speak for myself. I'm going to quickly reach this point where we're having the recommendations happening in this group. We're having those conversations and public hearings happening through the Education Committee. Those timelines are likely to intersect. And the quicker maybe we can get recommendations to this group,
Yep.
that and our hope are in alignment with the work we'll be doing in committee, right? That's the goal. The better. So maybe with no further ado, Fran, what do you think? Patrick?
I think, yes, Patrick and George and Ashley, welcome to you too. I did not mean to slight you in any way. So please go ahead and talk to us about, I mean, I love your brief on the, relationship between funding and outcomes. I also would love you to, and Jen, to speak to what you're hoping to come out of this session on ECS funding, special ed funding, etc. Okay, I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Sure, I'll take that. Thank you so much, Fran, and good to see the group. Appreciate the invitation and the kind words about Lisa and her family. I know she very much appreciates it as well. I'll just maybe we'll start with a little bit about where we're coming from this legislative session, and then I think, Fran, I'll tie in the funding and outcomes piece as a reflection of the fact that we know that it is not just about more money into a system, it is more money into a system with the expectations placed upon districts to achieve those outcomes and the guardrails in place to ensure that that those outcomes really are achieved. I think we recognize that the funding is part of that broader, conversation, and that the governor's Blue Ribbon Commission is reflective of that, fact as well. From a priority standpoint, our initial priorities this legislative session are really to reflect where we are in school funding over the past couple of years. So we've made some progress in how we fund public education in the state. We've gotten $770 million in need-based funding for our public school students. We are partially funding them with the same funding formula that takes into account the needs of the kids who are in the building and the resources required to get them to where we want them to go. But we're kind of at a crossroads when we think about the funding system in the state. And what I mean by that is that our funding system for those districts who have been receiving increases is really it's reached the end of the line in our current system, right? They are what we call fully funded, but that just means that the formula says that they don't need additional money. And so that's where they are in our districts who are quote unquote overfunded, who the formula says require a little fewer resources, are really held harmless at this point in time. So when we think about the education cost sharing formula and the choice program formula that sits next to ECS, we are somewhat at a crossroads because, again, ECS is the full funding has reached the end of the line, and the choice program grants for our magnets, our charters, and our open, our agri-science programs are they're at that crossroads, and they don't have a path forward to full funding there. And so taking those kind of that landscape into account, our priorities this legislative session are within the ECS formula to incorporate a change to the foundation amount, that base amount that's supposed to represent the amount needed to educate a non-need kid, that $11,525, to really have that number start to reflect what we all know it costs to educate kids in 2026. And that number is from over 10 years ago, not based in fact. We think we can get ourselves back on track to having that number reflect the cost increases that have happened since then. So that was 40% inflation since the last time this was adjusted, and things cost more than it used to. And so we really think that that's going to provide our districts with a start to the support they need in order to be successful. And the second priority of our organization is related to that choice program limbo status for our agri-science and our interdistrict magnet programs, along with our state charter schools. They are partially phased in. They receive a percentage of what we think they need, and we want to implement a path to get there over a 4-year period to essentially say, let's give them the roadmap, much like we gave our local and regional boards of ed the roadmap with the education cost sharing formula for a phase in, to get them to really make good on the promise that the state has made. And we think that these two really targeted and selected actions are reasonable, but also directly address the needs and concerns of our local districts at this point in time. And so I'll pause there, and George and Ashley, please add anything that you think I've missed, but I'll pause right there for now.
Patrick, could I just ask, what are you thinking in terms of, or Jen, what are you thinking in terms of an increase for this session
So I'll
in the
say,
foundation?
speaking for the School and State Finance Project, we are advocating for tying that foundation amount to the rate of inflation that is used in the spending cap of the state. So the state budget is adjusted by the spending cap every year to take into account increases in inflation and personal income. And we think that we can essentially use that same type of adjustment for the ECS formula. So that would be about a 6% adjustment starting next year in fiscal 2027.
Okay, and what would be the cost of that?
So
Patrick?
just the foundation, Ashley, I don't want to speak out of turn here, so I'll turn to you.
Patrick,
Yes,
before you go further, I did want to clarify, you said 6%. Is that like a request for a 6% increase next year, or an annual 6% till we're caught up? Or is we talking about a request to, because I've heard a couple of the proposals out there from the initial conversations. I know I want to say the Senate Republicans were looking at like $16,000 changing the foundation. And so I've heard other things, but I'm just trying to understand where your 6% is factoring in.
So we are advocating, while Ashley pulls that up, advocating for essentially getting the mechanism in motion to say, okay, moving forward, we're going to start using that spending cap adjustment figure in every future fiscal year. Next year, that happens to be about 6%, and the projections are 5% moving forward and 5% after that. But again, that's going to be a little bit of a moving target because we don't know what future inflation will be or growth in personal income there. So we're advocating for starting using that mechanism for future adjustments. We've heard
But
that
no
those
catch-up.
targets are out there. Yep.
Because if there's no catch-up mechanism, then we're just continuing to, like, we add, but we don't ever play catch-up on the 40% that has already occurred. So built into that, there doesn't sound like there's a catch-up mechanism.
Yeah, no, we're completely willing to have that conversation
Oh.
about what that target should be. We're aiming pretty small in year one.
Come
Hey,
on, Patrick, dream big with me. Come on.
We were trying to be cognizant of the cost of the state, but of course, we've seen all the other proposals out there in the Senate. The $16,000 number is roughly what the foundation would be had it kept pace with inflation since 2013. And catching up and then indexing it would, of course, be transformative for districts. But, getting that inflation adjustment in perpetuity would also be significant.
Agreed. I don't disagree with you in any of that. I just was curious about where you were landing.
So for additional context, I was able to pull up our model. So applying that like 5.94%, which is what we got from the Connecticut Fiscal Accountability Report, that's equivalent to a foundation amount of about $12,210. And again, if we applied this to the ECS foundation, that kind of gets trickled down to our other choice formulas. So in total for year-over-year costs to the state would be about $134.4 million. And obviously that cost goes up if we were to do that catch up that you had mentioned.
Ashley, sorry, could you be a little bit more specific? That would be 6% on top of the current foundation amount
Correct.
applied
Yeah.
kind of across the board.
Correct.
Okay. And that would be a 1-year cost to starting this process.
Correct.
Would it make sense to have 6% every year?
Well, not if inflation goes out the roof.
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense to index it to a metric that moves as the economy moves. It's similar to how the rest of the budget sort of ebbs and flows. So I have no challenge with that. I am, kind of logistically curious. Right now, Connecticut sits in sort of the bottom proportionality of state contribution to the funding of the education as sort of the proportional contributor. And I'm wondering how these shifts move that evaluation. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if we were to play catch up and index, does that move us out of the bottom 10 states and up into a better kind of weighting in terms of our state versus local contribution? I don't know that we can probably accurately answer that at this second, but it is something I think that is a driver in this conversation. I know, like with the governor. So it's a motivational component if we can navigate that. All right, I jumped in and I know Jen was going to weigh in. Sorry. I was just trying to understand.
I was just going to say, I think we're going to have several different proposals for where we start in year one, where we go before we begin the indexing, or whether we start indexing now and into perpetuity. I think some of the proposals that are more aggressive on the foundation amount aren't accounting for tuition. The ones that are indexing now are accounting for the districts phasing out their portion of tuition payments. So there's a lot of different moving pieces. I think we are all committed to getting as many dollars as possible back to our districts. And I don't want to speak this into existence, but it's an unfortunate reality that this is the off budget year. So recognizing this year will likely be underwhelming, but there is the strong support of passing the policy into perpetuity for us to continue on the right trajectory. So
In House Bill 5002, what does that ask for?
there's no language yet. But I think there will be like an inflation adjuster, a tuition phase out, so the districts aren't just getting more money to pay more in tuition, which is sort of what's been happening, which obviously disproportionately impacts all of our neediest districts, right? That's where we also have constrained where magnets and choice programs can operate. And so having both of those components, my guess is the negotiation will likely happen on how high we raise the foundation amount before we then just go into the indexing.
Got it. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I wonder if I could comment to Fran, not wearing my chef hat for the moment, which I'll put on shortly. But something else we need to consider, and maybe this is something that we may want to put in a footnote because it's not an explicit part of our charge, but I think it's relevant, is that it's not impossible to imagine changes in the fiscal guardrails that could lead to a change in how we approach this issue. I'm not going to ride the horse. I've written a white paper on why I think the guardrails are unconstitutional. But even apart from that, let's not forget that prior to 2017, aid to distressed municipalities was outside of the then statutory spending cap. And the task force set up, or the commission set up by the legislature to give definition to the terms of the spending cap that reported in 2017, for the first time ended up recommending moving aid to distressed municipalities back under the cap. Now, it may be, as I happen to believe, that with Connecticut having such a regressive and burdensome local property tax system, that aid to municipalities, whether ECS or excess cost or pilot, should not be under the spending cap, because those simply end up shifting costs rather than reducing costs, and the local property tax system is more aggressive than the state income tax based system. I just want to put that out there, that the guardrails are not fixed for all time, and that, again, whether we do it as a back of the report addendum or as a footnote or a minority report or whatever, we may want to have the General Assembly and the governor consider changes to the guardrails, in particular the spending cap, that would make it easier to reach some of the educational goals that we aspire to. I just want to put that issue out there as something that's not untouchable or fixed in stone or verboten to consider, because I think it's relevant and affects all of these recommendations.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Alex, I appreciate you bringing that in because I do think that one of the challenges, and I can't imagine what the legislators have to navigate in that framework, but you can't talk about this without talking about revenue. It's just not possible because ultimately, Connecticut is on some amount of a fixed income. And so these are choices that are being made. And the guardrails, I think, were very necessary perhaps at the time that they were done. But we live in a different economic reality today than when they were adopted. And it would make sense to, as we all do with our finances, as is a normal practice of running your own household, is to evaluate what are the rules that you are living by and do those serve the outcomes you are trying to attain at any given moment. And so it makes sense to me that the legislature, be it maybe not this session, because I respect what Jen said about this is the short session and there's some sense that, big fiscal pushes may not be the reality, but I do think and appreciate you putting that out there because I think it's something that makes sense for us to at least give a nod to, that we would like to see an evaluation of those things. And are they really serving the goals of the state of Connecticut?
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it. And Alex, I appreciate it. We all appreciate hearing all of the perspectives. I'm wondering, Patrick, can we continue on?
Happy to do so, Fran. The second part of this was going to speak a little bit about the document that I believe Lisa circulated to the group a couple weeks ago on the relationship between funding and outcomes. And this is something that our organization has been, from a strategy perspective, thinking about pretty broadly, given the fact that a lot of our work is trying to essentially pull one lever of the school ecosystem to essentially, achieve outcomes and produce results for kids, right? We're not just changing a funding system to change a funding system. We're changing it with the goal that at the end of the day, kids will learn more, learn better, achieve better, et cetera. And so we've been kind of placing our work within the broader context of I would say student performance in the past 10 years, with the fact that we've made some progress, as I had mentioned, in how we fund public education in the state. Some progress, but there's still a lot more to do, as everyone on this call knows. But that the question has come up, well, what has that resulted in, right? We have made some changes in how we fund public schools. We are recommending more changes. What has that meant, right? And so we've really placed our work within that context in this particular policy brief to say the research is very clear that funding and funding reform, and specifically equitable and adequate funding reform, does result in changes in outcomes and improves outcomes for students. But this is not an overnight change. This is a change where we do something and then that really has to be in place for many years before the tangible results come to bear. And when we think about this, if you do a funding reform and a kid is in 10th grade or something like that, there's only 2 years where that kid is getting the the benefits of that change, right? As opposed to a kid who comes in through kindergarten and is getting the benefit of that reform throughout the entire process. And so that was really our aim here, is to really connect our work to the research, but also say this isn't overnight. And there have been significant disruptions to education in the state and in our country with regards to the pandemic, right? And the remote learning environments that kids were in, but also the fact that it's it's also a factor of how we're measuring our progress and thinking about progress here. We have a system in the Alliance districts that hasn't really been studied in great detail since it came into place. And I know SDE has a report on the subject due soon, but that we need to also think about when we're tying in our accountability and our intervention system to funding, being very purposeful about that, and being open to revisiting that conversation to make sure what we set up back in 2012 is that meeting the needs of what we're doing right now, especially when we're changing the funding system. So it's a long policy brief, but that's really what we were trying to get at, is really getting clear the fact that these things take time, that the impacts of our changes take time overnight. They don't happen overnight. They're part of a broad ecosystem of pressures on the classroom that are moving student outcomes and performance in different ways. And that it is money, but it's also what are we putting in place with regards to support structures for districts and schools to make good on those promises. So that's really, Fran, what we were attempting to do in this piece.
I honestly thank the Connecticut Finance Project for that. I thought it was really clearly written, and it's the first time I've read research, but it's the first time I actually saw it in plain language that, hey, don't expect these changes overnight. People give you money and they, as a former superintendent in a large city, they give you money and they want to see change tomorrow. It doesn't happen like that. And, I might also add in this, it's not all about funding. And, as Patrick pointed out, the interruptions, for example, the pandemic, but I can add to other interruptions, changes in leadership. And, that matters. And mobility of teachers, et cetera. All of those things really do have an impact on how the outcomes happen. So I would want to say something in our recommendations about funding, but also about the importance of leadership. And I might add that I don't know how others feel, but I have no fear of accountability. I think I'm not shirking from it. I don't think any of my colleagues are shirking from it. We're happy to be held accountable for the right things and for progress, not for summative kinds of things. We want to show and demonstrate that money is making a difference.
And
Leslie, you have your hand up?
Don't think I do. I didn't mean to raise it.
Oh,
I
I'm sorry.
apologize.
It looks like, oh, no, it's just
There's
my
something in the background.
pointer is pointing to you.
Hello, everybody. Sorry to be late.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Likewise.
Fran,
Any-
I have a couple of thoughts. One is, Patrick, I have lost that study. It was somewhere in my email and it is now in my
I sent
email.
it this morning, Kate.
I saw something, but it didn't seem like it was attached then.
I think I'll send it to you again.
Yeah, if you
if
can send it
want.
me again, I'd really
Yep,
appreciate
yep,
it.
I will.
'Cause, I'm always a dork on those kind of things, happy to read. And I think
I will jump in. Did you send something this morning, Fran, or it came from a clerk?
We had a problem with your email address.
Oh, I'll drop it in
Leslie.
the chat, and so
Would you drop
someone
it in the
can-
chat,
yeah,
please?
Because I haven't received that. Thank you.
Yeah, we will send it to you, but I tried twice. I don't know what happened, but I tried twice with your email.
I don't know
Yeah,
if
I can
am I
see
missing
it.
something? Is there a chat, or is the chat disabled?
I think it's not here. I don't know. Christian,
Who?
just email it to me.
You got it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, because I can see where a PDF would be linked in there, but I can't access the PDF in my email for some reason. So I don't know if it got
Oh.
weirded out.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
But I think I think that, Fran, I agree with you in terms of I'm not fearful of appropriate accountability. I just don't want to land us back where we were like 20 years ago, where we got on a standardized testing like bandwagon, presuming that that was kind of how we were all going to measure success. And then we discovered, standardized tests, my gosh, they're biased and have all sorts of problems in terms of that. And I agree with you that we want to ensure that resources are going where we want them to go. And I do think, there's interesting questions about accountability when we talk about it in terms of metrics. I know that when we look back at like COVID money, for example, one of the things that stands out is that across the state, there was a 20% increase in administration, and we flatlined in certified positions. There was actually no net gain in certified positions when we infused resources. Now, there's some practical aspect to that in that we have a teacher shortage, and that's a reality. So hard to add people you don't have. But I do think, to your point, money is a piece of it. Where that money gets spent matters. It matters deeply because not all money spent has the same impact. And so I think that there is that aspect of this, and I don't know if that exceeds our charge, perhaps. I don't know if commenting on that, but I think when we talk about accountability, there's outcome accountability and then there's expenditure accountability. And I think on all those things, it makes sense for us to be open to what is it, these are, and I see Rep. Wielander's here, and she's very good about reminding us these are public dollars that should have public oversight and should have public input. And so I think keeping our like what is necessary to get the money that we need is a good question. Like, what is it that people need to see to feel like the money's getting spent in a meaningful way? And perhaps the School State Finance Project report will give us some thoughts on that, but I just think that that's not the wrong question to ask.
Patrick, can I ask, this is Alex, what's the report you were speaking about? It's going to be released.
Did you not get it either, Alex?
No, I got his report. I got their report.
Yeah.
I got your email, but I thought Patrick mentioned that there's some report to be issued by the State Department of Education.
Oh,
I
in the near
believe
future.
the CSDE was charged with examining the Alliance District program with
Okay.
results either this month or next. I can't remember which.
Okay, thank you.
Mary, Representative Wielander, did you want to say something? You're on mute, I think, or no. Okay, we'll come back to you. I'm hearing similar pieces from all of you, and I certainly don't want to curb the discussion, so cut me off if I'm going too fast. But I sort of would like if I could ask you to send Jen and me, your recommendations for what, just bullet them. And, we will try to put them together in terms of what you are thinking about for funding and what you want to make sure we put in our response. I don't want the response to be a tome, so it'll probably bullet things, right, Jen, you think? But if you could do that on the ECS funding for sure, and then Alliance District, I have a lot of questions, but I'm waiting for that report to come out. I think there's a whole lot of Alliance districts, and I'm not sure, some of them don't even get money. And I think people also forget that Alliance money is part of ECS dollars.
Yeah, there's no
So-
new Alliance money. I wanted to say
Yeah.
all Alliance money means is that it can't be spent by the municipality, has to be spent by the board.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, Jen. So it's ECS dollars, but it's just a partitioning of ECS dollars that goes directly to the district, which, by the way, I'm not sure why ECS dollars can't go directly to the district, but that's a whole other
Great.
conversation. And no, Mayor. And so I maybe go off and come back. I'm hoping that we'll get recommendations from you. I think we all know we need the money. We don't want to wait. I know it's a short session. I know it's a non-budget year, but we've got to have, in my opinion, what I hear is we've got to have an adjustment for 27. And I don't hear anybody opposed to that. Now,
Well, I think we hear a lot of public support, and my concern, as always, is some of the private conversations that that happen when the jockeying goes on. And so I think hopefully there's enough public sentiment. I worry about the governor trying to find the smallest path to saying he made the move. But I think I'm very, very concerned in the next fiscal year that we're going to see some of the federal shifts actually hit us. And this is a small way to get out ahead of some of those things.
so anybody opposed to sending us recommendations over the next week or so? If they could be in by let's see, what's today, the 10th? If we could have them by the 24th, I think that would be really helpful. On
Are you okay with the fact that I am in support of the governor's budget as a representative for
course,
CSTE,
of
so I
course.
will not be providing any recommendations.
Yes, Jessica, I understood. I still curse the day that the SDE came under the governor's cabinet and we couldn't talk separately. I'll just, I'm old, so I remember history. So, we used to be able to say what we needed to say and advocate for what we needed to advocate for, sort of like the school district operated with the municipality. And it was just, when I was there, that was the case. And it was just so much better. And I try to make people understand why you can't do that anymore. So at any rate, that's,
Thank you.
that is, I totally get it. Mayor, can you, any different?
I don't know. Did this work?
Yes.
No, I I appreciate all the information that was shared, and for all of this effort, that my comment was really just silly in that, well, maybe not silly, but truthful in that I'm not a big fan of standardized testing. And if, so any way that we can explore the option of redirecting dollars that are spent in that way and is more, more supportive of teachers within the classroom, I would love to explore that, because a lot of times we have the tests that are then, you have to have the prep book, which is also sold by the same testing company, and the grading and the, an analyzation and all of that. And it's all commercial. And so I think that there's different ways that we could explore that and really look at how are we using, our taxpayer dollars that benefits our children and our schools.
Well, I hope it's still on the agenda, Mary, because Jen and I talked about reducing standardized testing. We've talked about it forever. And, I'm all in favor. And we know from the research that it's formative assessment designed by teachers that really makes a difference in kids moving forward. I'm not about not ever, measuring how our kids are doing, but damn it, do we have to measure it every year?
Yeah. Well, let me know how I can assist with that. Happy to support.
Yeah, and by the way, when I checked it, and several years ago now, if we just knocked out, I know this is a tangent, but if we knocked out 3 grades and we did 3, 5, and 7 and knocked out 4, 6, and 8, it's about $1.5 million per grade. That could be used in other ways. So just saying. I'm with you. Maybe we can find a way to get that in there. Is there any bill on that this session, Jen?
We raised a title for assessments. The department's supposed to be getting us their recommendations. I think
Okay.
that their recommendations are going to be more focused around limiting all the additional standardized tests our districts do. My kid just finished NWEA again.
Yeah.
So like if you're gonna do one, have at least be the consistent one for all kids. You actually have some measure. I think there is some benefit for like families to have some consistency, right? To look across what's happening, but we don't need to burden kids with like multiple tests assessing the same skills, which I think like almost all of our districts are doing. Anyways, we could have a whole separate conversation on that. I wanted to
Okay.
just add before, and Leslie, I see your hand up, and Kate, I see your hand up. I do think there is support for moving ECS out of the spending cap. I think realistically that would happen in a budget year, not an off budget year, but I do think that there's going to be support for that. And then the difficult piece around some, like, I don't think there's like secret conversations that like people actually don't want to support education. I think the reality is we have $126 million into the spending cap. Unless we're going to statutorily modify the spending cap, like that's the parameter. And we don't have in the House a veto-proof majority. And so I think that's the constraint. So I just wanted to add that.
I'll jump in. I did hear you say there could be a whole
Oh,
nother
sorry.
conversation on the testing piece. But I would be remiss if I didn't chime in agreement with Representative Wieslander for sure. And I think we should also note the impact on teacher morale and teacher retention when this level of testing is happening, and then we shift over 3 years, then we change the company that we use. So that's a money grab for corporations who are selling the next shiny thing. And teachers actually have mastered something of how to implement and use said resource, and then it changes. And that often comes when there's new leadership or when somebody, has an incentive to switch. I find it to be a tremendous waste of resources. And just co-sign with what you flagged. And then Representative Leeper, we had a separate conversation around, and I'll say it's a sad irony, and this is not blame, it's a highlight, right? And you know where we stand. We were on board with you on the cell phone stuff, Representative Leeper. And then at the same time, younger children are spending a tremendous amount of time on screens during the school day. Only to be
I would
told,
set them all on fire, Leslie. Get them out. I would be so happy to never see another Chromebook.
It's great. I can't wait to work on this with you. It is a real point of unity because we're sending a mixed message to our kids when we tell them that they have to be on iPads in kindergarten, but when they're in 7th grade, they're not allowed to be on their phone anymore. So co-sign.
The state is certainly not telling anybody to do these things. These are our districts doing that, right? Like, why? Why are they doing that?
They're doing it because it's easier. Well, I don't want to speak for Fran, but I would suspect it's easier for management to process the data when it's done by an outside company and when it's fed through the online systems. I suspect there's some efficiency argument there, but I don't think efficiency should come at the expense of our kids' well-being.
Oh,
I
my
think,
kids are on Chromebooks, nothing to do with assessments every day, all the time. Nothing to do with.
I do think it has to do with COVID, and I think we have to speak out more. I think during COVID, we got them all on Chromebooks, and we were told, every kid needed a Chromebook, and we pushed it, and we haven't recovered from that. And
100%.
that's what I'm thinking.
There's a
Can
new
I just get Patrick for a minute, and then I'll come to you, Kate?
Appreciate it, Fran. Sorry to interrupt the discussion. I just, Rep. Leeper, when we're talking about the spending cap, one thing I would just encourage the folks on this call to keep in mind is that when you have stuff under the spending cap, consider what's in versus what's out and the growth rates of those items, right? If you're having something that's growing pretty quickly, you want to, again, get that outside of the spending cap. Thinking about the distressed municipality aid, when that was in versus out of the spending cap, I think there were many years where distressed municipalities and the aid that they got, that actually grew much less than the growth in the spending cap rate. So it made sense to have it under the spending cap because that allowed them, the legislature, to do more things with that additional money. So if the group is considering talking about that, just being clear to make sure that we're being cognizant of the changes in growth rates for things versus where they sit under or not under the spending cap.
Yes, because I know there's a lot of interest like in putting Medicaid outside the spending cap, and like that would have a really different impact, right? So for sure, these are all the conversations that are happening. And Leslie, I didn't mean to speak over you. Just yes, I'm with you.
Yep.
All good.
Kate.
So just as to dovetail, and if you haven't heard him, there's I can't remember his first name. I think it's like Jared Horvath. He recently testified in front of the United States Senate on the impact of tech in schools, and that the overall growth of children has declined since we introduced education tech. And he has research that really stipulates that we have and that what we've done is we've changed assessment to match the diminished ability of the children based on the technology. So he uses the SAT as an example, that you used to read a passage and answer a set of questions. When many of us took the SAT, that would sound familiar. Here is a passage, here's 6 to 8 questions on that passage. The new SAT has had to adapt to a social media style. You get 75 words, 1 sentence, 1 question, and they do that 56 times. And it's because we have created a whole generation of children who have no attention span, no ability to actually generate, absorb content and return it. And he makes a really solid argument for how we have really harmed the ability of our children to be successful over time. And where this bleeds into this conversation, I think really impressively, is that we take an extraordinary amount of resources, financial resources, and buy programs and computers and devices that are intentionally built to have to be replaced on a 2 to 3 year cycle, things that are fragile for children. And so we expend, and I had asked years ago, and I think it was even passed, Jen would probably remember better, but we had asked for an assessment audit, and we asked for the State Department to investigate annually how much time and money is spent on these assessment practices. Because it's not about getting rid of all of them, because I understand, like there needs to be, baseline information and data. But when we think about how much money and time we're spending on these things, and they're drawing from what we know actually changes kids, which is adults, children have never went, oh my God, this program was the best. It changed my life. Now I'm going to be a doctor because I did IXL for 4 hours a week for every week when I was in 6th grade, right? Like nobody ever says that. Nobody ever said, oh my God, that canned reading curriculum, that did everything for me. Thank God we did that. Or, handwriting without tears changed my life. Like nobody ever says that. So we have to recognize that when we talk about outcomes and investment, that we're wasting money in our school districts. in some places. And I'm not saying it's all good or all bad, but it raises the question of, when we talk about, are the state monies, are the monies that we're, privileged to hand over, are they being spent where it will improve student outcomes? I think it begs the question of, well, where is money being spent? And Jen and Leslie, I'm all in on that conversation. And if you haven't seen this guy, check him out. His testimony in front of the Senate is not long, but I was like, oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I think we can certainly include that as a practical piece in our recommendations. I don't have any problem with including that. I do think AI has some interesting things to offer in terms of differentiation. So I don't want everything to go away, but I agree with you 120%. I have 6 grandkids that are forever on their screens. So I'm 100%. And I think, to be honest with you, even though you say the districts do this, I think superintendents, if they felt they had the leniency to do this and understood it, that they would move in a different direction. So I feel good about where we're going with ECS. I feel less confident about where we're going with magnets. So maybe we could talk about that a bit more, Alex.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping we would do.
Yeah.
One thing to remember is there are several different types of magnets in the state. They're what we call host magnets, in which a local education board has a magnet program within its district. And then there are magnets that are operated and funded by RESCs, so-called regional education service centers. And they have different types of funding and operation programs. I wanted to speak mainly about the magnets that are funded by RESCs, which involves a lot of the Sheff versus O'Neill magnets under a order from the Connecticut Supreme Court, and in 2021 a stipulation and order for a long-range solution. As I mentioned in my little paper I wrote for the last meeting, the big difference between magnets funded by a RESC and local neighborhood schools is that RESCs have no property tax base to raise any funding for their education services. Obviously, towns can debate whether to increase or decrease their local funding to supplement ECS, but that's not the case with RESCs. With a RESC, a magnet school really has only 2 sources of funding. One is state funding that's based on a per pupil grant, and the second is either additional state funding or the charging of tuition. And the General Assembly several years ago, led by East Hartford and some other municipalities in which there were a rather large number of students who were attending magnets in the RESC Sheff orbit, decided to seek a cap on tuition payments that the General Assembly adopted. And so the concern that I think we need to address is, first, making sure that the state magnet tuition grant keeps up with the rising costs in terms of cost of living. For about 10 years or so, there was no cost of living increase. And as a result, a lot of the attractiveness of the magnet programs, things like, extra aid in the classroom or field trips, because these are voluntary school choice programs, lost a lot of the magnet attractiveness, and as a result had more trouble attracting students. The second thing is about the tuition. And as you know, last year, on a trial basis, the legislature wisely, in my mind, added state funding in order to reduce the tuition that sending districts would need to pay. That unfortunately was the $12 million in the fiscal year 27 budget that the governor has recommending taking away. And Jessica, I'm sorry to say this in front of you, but I don't think that was a wise move, and I don't think it will pass in the legislature. But we need to figure out, again, on an ongoing basis, how do magnets operated by RESCs deal with cost of living adjustments going forward? And finally, let me just say that, at least in the case of Chef, the stipulation that was agreed to in 2021 involves the goal by 2028 of every Hartford resident student who applies to a Chef desegregated school setting, whether a magnet school or an open choice seat or a CTEC seat, is required to get an offer from the state for a seat. Now, there are some little twists and turns in there about who exactly is a demand student, but generally, we're looking toward an expansion of the number of students in a Chef setting. So this makes this funding question even more pressing. And I hope that we'll deal with these issues. One, what's the basis of keeping up the magnet payments so that they keep track with the foundation amount? Two, dealing with the cost of living. Three, dealing with the tuition amount. And fourth, districts, the so-called sending districts that send students to a RESC under the Chef system still get their ECS funding, even though students who account for that funding are no longer being educated locally. And so there may need to be some way to address how do we translate the reduction in the number of Chef students who have left a district. How do we help that district get the benefit of any of the cost savings that might come about through a reorganization that takes into account the students who are leaving? Right now, that's not really addressed appropriately, and that's why this dual funding continues. Thank you, Fran, for letting me raise those issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex, and we'll certainly include, and I'm sure you'll, from your paper, and if you can send some bullets
Yeah.
on that, it would be great, and others on the magnet schools. I will just say one thing. I know the Chef versus O'Neill. I know that case from way back. However, I also know that there are Band-Aids, and I do not for 1 minute understand the discrepancy in the per pupil allocation from the state in the Chef districts versus New Haven or Bridgeport. There's a major discrepancy in that funding. And I know that, what I hear is, well, there was a lawsuit, that's why. And I'm saying, well, then there ought to be a lawsuit in New Haven and Bridgeport, because I don't quite understand that. I never have. And go ahead, Jen.
You'll be happy to hear 5002 is going to apply the Chef bump for magnet tuition to all the magnets.
Oh, say it again.
So the Chef discrepancy, it's weird.
Yep.
Just refer to it like as a Chef bump. You get like a little extra if you're in
Yep.
a Chef magnet. We're in our proposal including that bump for all the magnets, not only the
That's
Chef
wonderful.
magnets.
Thank you. I think that we should you know, just my recommendation, that we include that in, the magnet school funding. And I'm very distressed about hearing about the pullback of 12 million in the governor's budget. Horribly, distressed because, you know, finally, for the last 3 years, we've had, or yeah, I think three, tuition, you know, with the 58-42%, it's really mattered. And I don't hear screaming and yelling from the school districts. And it really pitted school districts against each other and against risks, and the amount of energy and time that was spent fighting back and forth. You know, you raise the tuition, we can't afford that, and so on and so forth. And I don't think I have to explain to any of you how the ECS dollars, I know that they get it. I know they get ECS dollars, but how that matters. And, you know, pulling that back, if you have 50 kids that attend a magnet school, it really doesn't matter in terms of the number of teachers you have, et cetera. So just saying. Does anyone else want to add anything to the magnet conversation?
Fran, if I could just jump in here, and I completely
Yeah.
agree with you. And I just want to make sure folks on this call know, and we've been letting folks know that the governor's proposal for next year, it removes that $12 million from the RESC magnets, and it
Yep.
doesn't let them charge any more tuition. It allows tuition increases in future years adjusted for inflation, but for fiscal 2027, the money is removed from the RESCs and they're still capped in tuition. So when we think about those magnet schools, particularly the ones, you know, that the state has charged with implementing Chef, it is a big cut. And we really want to make sure folks are aware of that. Returning to one of the bigger points that Alex made, I just want to emphasize that and maybe this is the right venue, maybe the governor's blue ribbon panel is better, but we've just layered these systems on top of each other without considering how a magnet system, a agriscience, a state charter school, how it impacts all the way down, whether it be student counts, whether it be the financial responsibilities of who's in charge of special education, the PPT in this type of school versus the PPT for a kid going to another type of school. We've just layered them on top of each other. And I think that more awareness needs to be made there, because we get caught in thinking about the magnets versus the this and the that. And like, it's really a fact that we just kind of stacked them all on top of each other. And with the dual funding of students, local school districts do have responsibilities for the kids who leave the district to do something somewhere else, whether it be special education, transportation, or otherwise. And in a lot of cases, like you mentioned, Fran, if you have a small number of kids leaving the district, there may not be those cost savings with regards to, you don't have fewer classrooms if you only have 50 kids in total leaving a district. But, we think of that North Star as, ideally, we would have a situation where the funding reflects the kids who are, entering the building, but we need to be cognizant of the fact that, at the end of the day, if a student leaves a magnet program or whatever, they have to go to their local or regional board of ed who's fiscally responsible for educating the kid. And I think it's just the fact that we've layered things on top of each other that makes this a complex conversation.
Agreed, 100%. And I saw that when I really dug down deep into the magnets, and I agree with you on that, on the charters as well. And I also think there's grave misunderstanding on the alliance districts too. That's people don't know, they think they get funding on top of ECS funding. It's the same funding, and so it does tend to frustrate me a great deal. And so I hope we can come out very strong on that in our recommendations. I actually want Patrick to write them all. I know. Well, maybe I can talk you into it. Kate.
I would just say that, coming from a district that did have a large push and pull on magnet tuition and what a funding challenge that creates, I think, Patrick, to your point about the layering of the systems, I think we do have some, inherently a problem. And the reason that we're never able to fully absolve is that we haven't transferred the responsibility of those children to the magnet or to the charter. And they almost become like this subcontractor who can opt out and opt in at different times. And so the difficulty also lies in the commitment to the student. So, the only place that students are 100% guaranteed a spot is in their local school district. And so that ends up being the fallback, right? I went to this magnet, it didn't work out. Now I'm back in my regular school district. The money doesn't transfer at the same rate as the students necessarily. Or, I went out into this charter and it didn't work. So now I'm back in my home school. And so there's this question that still always lingers is, if we're going to do a full financial commitment to those magnets and charters, should there then be the full commitment on their behalf that that student is theirs? It is theirs for the year. They, like everybody else, they have to work out whatever goes on. And but right now we have sort of this model that allows the commitment to that child to be move. And therefore it's super hard to get the funding right. Because if the funding were truly with, listen, this is your student, they're your student, then you wouldn't be able to move out of that program. And so I think that I think that's where some of the funding challenge lies, is in that student mobility question. I will also say, as a district that again sent a significant chunk, they never made a significant difference in the student teacher ratio across a district, because that's not how they move. It's 2 kids in this 2nd grade in that school.
Yeah.
3 kids over here in this 4th grade in a different school. And so the disbursement of them throughout the district doesn't relieve the district of significant weight in terms of expenditures.
I
I
agree.
don't know what the great answer to that is. I just know that there's a piece of this that's about the student mobility and the flexibility that both the school and the families have to move all over the place, that creates a challenge in terms of funding. And I don't know the answer to that either, by the way. I just offer it as yet another delightful piece of how, and I would also add, and I do think this is very important for us to keep in mind, our districts don't feel fully funded. We say they're fully funded, but they do not feel fully funded. They feel resource restricted. They feel tight. They feel inflexible. They feel like, we're just grabbing onto whatever we can get and keeping it. And that's causing some of this challenge as well. And there is a question in my head that if we were to fully fund at the inflation respectful rate, would there become an ability to navigate this conversation differently? Because right now, if you said to people, we have to adjust for your pupil assignment, you'd have wide scale panic, because resources are so, tense and so tight. If the resources felt different and felt funded in 2026, might there be an ability to have flexibility that doesn't currently feel like it's accessible?
I will just say to that, when I was superintendent in Bridgeport, I said, I had 6 charters. So it was kind of like, well, fund the charters, fund them, give them what they need, but I want them to have the special ed and the transportation as well. And, that doesn't happen. It falls back on the school districts, but hopefully we're going to get all of this into, and by the way, I'll add one more thing, because I have a long history with the magnet schools, and I would say that the state and the federal government did not follow through on that either. It was their program. They funded it, and all of a sudden they pulled the funding. Do you know what I mean? And it's just it ends up in being, fights among districts and risks and not necessary. Anyway, I think I know where we stand on that. Anybody else on magnets?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to jump in. Two things. First, I do look forward to learning more about what Representative Leeper shared about the improvements to 5002 with respect to magnets. I think about the high school magnets in New Haven, and I think they really are a bright spot when we think about school integration, when we think about choice, when we think about career tech ed, when we think about hands-on learning, all of the things that I know this group agrees on, that our magnet high schools in New Haven are a shining star for what is possible when we create real world learning opportunities that align to life after high school for our adolescent learners. And I will admit I need to do more homework on the funding piece of it. And I say that because those magnet schools, those are our schools. Those are that's New Haven Public Schools. It's not separate like some of the other districts are. So when I fight for funding for New Haven Public Schools, that absolutely is magnet schools, because that's the bulk of our programming, especially at the high school level. And I welcome folks to come visit any of our schools and see the amazing things that are happening in our magnet high schools that are public, that are more integrated than many of the schools that are not scrutinized for racial isolation because they're majority white, which is a conversation that we need to be willing to have, because it really is bringing a white supremacist premise to the analysis. That schools that are majority white are fine, but schools that are majority Black and brown are not. And that is something that we are all responsible for. And if we're not working to undo that, there's a problem in the state of Connecticut. I'll name that, and then I'll just jump in on the charters. It is incredibly frustrating that and I know there's nuance to this that people higher than me at the district level understand better, but I'll name, we have vacancies for special ed in New Haven Public Schools, and we have New Haven Public Schools employees working in charters. And I know that's because of the way that the law is written, but it is really hard when our public school kids are not able to get their services provided. Our members, our employees are sent to charters to do that work. And every kid deserves to have their IEP implemented, not just kids in charters because we're fearing the impact of the law or lawsuits or what have you. So it is the ripple effect is very real for kids who go to New Haven Public Schools, not the charter programs that are in New Haven.
Interesting, Leslie. I didn't know that. I mean, I know that staff has to go to PPTs, but I didn't know they were offering services.
Yeah, I believe, so don't quote me on this, but I believe it is the result of it's either pay the charters or send the staff. And sending the staff is less expensive than pay the charters. So we send the staff. But now we've got, like I said, we've got kids who are in our schools who do not have services because New Haven has to send our staff to the charters.
Anything else on charters that you want to say as we move forward? Because we just have one left after that, and that's Alliance. And so if we follow all of it, and class size, I think I'm going to send you the research I have, but I'm thinking all of you are going to agree to reasonable class size. It's been a lifelong battle, but anyway, anything else on charters?
I'll just restate what my senator says, and I think it's worth repeating, Gary Winfield, that we will not have to have the ongoing charter battle if our public schools are fully funded. And to Kate's point, there's a claim that they are, but they're not, because we're still playing makeup for millions and millions and millions of dollars of lost funding because of the slow implementation. So I think the charter battle can be squashed once public schools have the funding that we should have. And I recognize that maybe that isn't the most common union argument. But I also, we would love to find some detente here. And I respect my state senator a great deal. He's a pragmatist and a visionary at the same time. And if we can get to a point where children in New Haven public schools have a special ed teacher in every vacancy, where we have facilities that are safe, where we have the programming that kids deserve, this will be less about, what benefits a small percentage of kids and more about what benefits the vast majority of kids who go to public schools. Thanks.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you. And
If I can
last
just,
but
can I just tag on to, I think Leslie hit that really importantly, and I do think, 90% of our students are in the public schools, the traditional public schools. And so it's important that we figure out how to make this less about the push and pull between the different programs and more to be about how everybody gets what they need. When Alex said about magnets being attractive, and he mentioned something about field trips and not having the resources for those. And I'm sure Leslie had probably the same reaction I did. Field trips have gone away. School districts don't have the resources for field trips, and they become an equity problem, because if you have to pay to go, then only those who can afford to go get to go on field trips, and that doesn't feel right. And then if a district can't provide the opportunity for all the students, they opt to not provide the opportunity at all. And then you turn that on its head and you go, and again, I will only speak from the areas that I have intimate knowledge, but my vice president taught in Darien. They didn't struggle to have resources to do things. I taught in Manchester. We had to stop a 4th grade field trip because only one school could afford to do it. And that didn't feel appropriate. So I think that when we talk about this, the vision that we should have is, what do we want every child, regardless of zip code, to have the opportunity to experience? And how many different exciting ways can we make that available to children? And unfortunately, we've created a system where it feels hyper competitive. And I agree with Leslie. We've long been seeking detente. But when resources are scarce, the fight is intense.
thank you. Thank you, all, and please send me your recommendations on that. And I'm conscious of the time, but we have a few minutes left. Could we just talk about alliance districts and what they have charged us with is how are they developed? How are they reviewed and approved? How are guidelines? I don't understand this. Consideration of establishing guidelines for the hiring of non-classroom personnel, and consideration of interventions that the Department of Education may take in regard to the operations of an alliance district. So I'm not 100% sure of what you think about that. It used to be we had 18 priority districts, and of that there were probably 5 or 6. They used to be Durg Durg I, that were most intense. Now there are 36, and for the life of me, with the pushback, the cutback at the State Department of Education, I can't imagine how they're all being serviced and what the purpose is in having 36 alliance districts. But that's just a wondering on my part.
We are going to get a report again about the alliance districts from SD. I think we actually were supposed to get it at the beginning of this month, and I'll follow up with Laura after this. And I think it's probably going to be worthy of sort of like a standalone forum to talk through that report. I haven't gotten a preview of it, but I do think there was interest in reducing the number so that the resources are really targeted at our priority districts. And then I think we're going to have some education to do around that Alliance districts don't get money, but Alliance districts do have a hold harmless. And the Alliance money that goes directly to the boards has a different minimum budget requirement that I think people are going to fight for. So I think there's going to be pretty nuanced arguments around those components. And is my hope that SDE will have included those components in their recommendations. I would love to find a way for all ECS money to go directly to boards.
The boards. Maybe
Jen,
we
I
can
think
make that.
we should put that in. I think, I know that, and listen, I've had this fight with some of your colleagues that oppose that thought, but we create a layer of drama that's unnecessary. I would also encourage this group to consider moving away from the minimum budget requirement and go back to the minimum expenditure requirement, because that also creates tension between municipal government bodies, because they don't have to expend it, they just have to budget it. And so we've had cases where boards of ed and boards of finance get into a push and pull. Well, we budgeted the 2 million, but you can't spend it. They budget it to meet the minimum budget requirement, but then they won't expend it. And so, and they create like a fight with the Board of Ed. And I think that if there's two things I would advocate, and I don't know that we'll win them, but moving to a minimum expenditure requirement, which did exist, that was the language. I want to say under Jody Rowlett, it shifted because there was this thought that what if the municipality has all this extra money and then you're forcing them to spend it? And I asked if that was a real problem anywhere ever in the history of time. But that was part of the reasoning. So if we can layer those things in, even if we don't win them, I think they're good arguments and conversations to have, because you know, in how many other spaces do we require a pass-through funding? You know, I think there's a question about that. And maybe this is not the time that we'll win that argument, but I'd like us to make it.
Yep. Okay.
Patrick?
Patrick, you have your hand up.
Sure. Fran, I'll be brief. I'll just ask the somewhat provocative question that we've had this Alliance District program in place for over 10 years now, and hundreds of millions of dollars and various hoops that we've had districts go through. Is it working? We don't have a comprehensive evaluation of, we've asked districts to do this stuff to give them the money that they already said, we already said that they needed. Is it resulting in the increases in student achievement that we want, right? So setting aside the fact that it's tangled up in ECS, which I think we all have thoughts on, like, are we identifying the right supports for districts and the right plans for them? I just think we need to do, and maybe this is part of the CSDE study, but a comprehensive evaluation of, we've been doing this for a couple of years now. Is it getting the results that we want? And so I would push a little bit on that, but also, again, disentangling it from ECS, and also the fact that it's only districts with more than 1,000 kids and only local and regional boards of ed, right? Like there's a classification here that if we think that these are things that low performing districts should be doing, shouldn't it be all low performing districts outside of these set criteria that the state has set? I would encourage a revisiting of the criteria for Alliance District evaluation, because we know that not all low performing districts have more than 1,000 kids or are just local and regional boards of ed.
I don't know that, and Patrick, I would agree on kind of all of those accounts, that I think we started down Alliance, but the practicality, and I worked in an Alliance district, it'll never not be an Alliance district by the way we currently structure them. And there's one prime reason. It's a transient population. Therefore, we never can capture some of the things that we're trying to do. And so you hold up this measure of success that looks really great if you have a kid from kindergarten through 12th grade. That is this very specific trajectory of success. But if you have a transient population where anywhere between, like, in my district, I think we turned over about 70% of the kids between K and 12. Like, we only graduated 30% of the kids that started with us in kindergarten. The other 70% had come in throughout their career. So that alone begs the question of, how are we applying resources to navigate that experience versus, when you have a 12 or 13-year investment in a singular student, that looks very different, that the programming looks different. And I also think, we've created kind of an environment where there's no benefit to succeeding out of being an alliance.
Well, I also think there's no benefit to succeeding outside. There never was a benefit to succeeding outside being a priority district either, because I remember Middletown doing quite well and moving and wanting to move out, but they would have lost priority district funds. So, it was, it's always been an issue. But I would say, just having been an Alliance District superintendent for a number of years, the amount of paperwork and the amount of reporting and the amount of keeping track of things, I'm not sure it was worth. I'm not sure it was a great return on investment. I'm just saying. And so I would like to look at that more, but I want to see also what the state says. Okay, we're at the end of our time. I'm hoping you can send recommendations, Jen, to both of us, and we will try to put something together before the March 10th meeting, I think is our next meeting. Hopefully, don't hold us to it, but we'll try our best. I know Jen is going to be particularly busy, but we'll try to do it. And we'll try to put something out to you before then, and then hear your recommendations at that meeting. We'll probably have to have another one to come back to sum it up. I want to thank you all, and thank you, many, many thanks to Alex and to the Connecticut Finance Project for your contributions. George, Patrick, Ashley, I greatly appreciate it. I'm still going to lean on you to see if I can get some more information to do a report. But at any rate, I want to thank all of you. Actually, it's a good conversation. So we'll move forward, because God knows our public schools are they're just everything to us in Connecticut. And if we don't have great public schools, what do we have? So, and I happen to think that we do have great public schools, and we have phenomenal educators doing the best job they can every day, and kids really growing and achieving because of our public schools. So I feel very good about that. So at any rate, by the way, before I came on here, I just had a voucher conversation with some Yale students. So maybe I'm even feeling stronger about it. But it just so that I appreciate the conversation. I know Jen appreciates it, and I wasn't thrilled to be co-chair of the Bergen piece on funding. It's not my strong suit, but I've learned a lot. So thank you.
Thanks, Fran. Thanks,
Thank
everyone,
you
for
all.
your
We're in
time.
good hands, Fran.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.